The Indianapolis Colts have narrowed down their roster to 53 players as the regular season begins in just 10 days. So, which players did and didn't make the cut? And what does Chris Ballard think of the roster heading into the season? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, all week it's been about the roster cuts and getting this roster down to 53. Now, in the grand scheme of things, probably wasn't too many surprising moves, but at the same time, some of the numbers in specific position groups that could be a little bit concerning for Colts fans.
Yeah, and there's still enough, I think, at least enough moves that happened where you're like, ooh, that was pretty surprising. But I also think that when you look at this roster from top to bottom, first off, it's a lot quicker to scroll through on the Colts website. I'll tell you that. And second off, it's who you expected, man. I mean, for the most part, it's who you expected. We're going to kind of dive into it a little bit, but it was absolute madness, I'll tell you, for any NFL franchise when you've got to cut like 25 plus names in a matter of what seems like 24 hours. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it really is. So tonight we are going to run through the 53-man roster for the Indianapolis Colts. It has been out a couple of days, but we're going to run through it and give our thoughts. We're also going to talk about the practice squad, as 16 of the 17 spots on the practice squad for the Colts are now filled. Chris Ballard spoke this week about the roster and he gave his thoughts. And of course, we're going to give you all of the latest injury and other news as the Colts, like I said, 10 days away from week one. And we've already getting off started to a fantastic start. Patrick, the CFO of Horseshoe Huddle, a $20 super chat. Patrick's fired up, you guys. Really appreciate all of your support, buddy. It means the world to Drake and I. As always, can't thank you enough. Patrick is saying, in February 2024, that's on me. I didn't give Gus the secondary he needed to succeed. In August of 2024, here's the exact same personnel we ended the season with. Just joking. I got you a dude that was cut by another team. Party on. So obviously, Patrick talking about the secondary of the Indianapolis Colts, and Chris Ballard. We'll definitely be talking about that this evening. But I think Patrick is kind of echoing a lot of the sentiment for some Colts fans, the frustrations about really not addressing the secondary with more outside help. And Patrick goes on to say, seriously, if Brent's continues to be an injury magnet and Kenny, God forbid, misses any time, this offense better put up 35 a game, and Gus better hope Partridge has the D-line getting 12 sacks a game. So it's going to be an interesting to watch all season long. And really a lot of the success of this defense could be predicated on if the Colts defense takes a jump, if the secondary takes a jump with the likes of Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, Nick Cross, obviously. So we're going to dive into all of that this evening. And Patrick, again, really, really appreciate all of your support, buddy. It absolutely means the world to Drake and I. We got a couple others in the chat. Stats Matt as well. OMG, Jason Bean, Micah Abraham, and Jalen Simpson aren't on the 53. Sound the alarms. We are doomed. That was a lot of the sentiment for some Colts fans. But guys, let's just take a deep breath. I know Taven Bryan is still on the roster, unfortunately, but hey, we'll talk you through everything tonight. Sean Contright is here. Truitt is here as well. We've got the whole gang in the building. And if you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Go follow at Colts _SI on X, and then subscribe right here to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, especially now that the regular season is right around the corner. You're never going to want to miss a single episode. If you can't catch us live on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well, and you'll get access to our Horseshoe Huddle halftime episodes. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. So Drake, let's really dive into it here. The Colts 53-man roster was revealed on Tuesday at we thought it was going to be at 4 p.m. We were actually getting ready to live stream on the Bleacher Report app. Turns out it wasn't at 4 p.m. It was more like 4:50 p.m. They had us waiting for quite some time. But guys, here is the 53-man roster for the Indianapolis Colts. So we're going to go through position by position and really dive in here and give our thoughts on each position group. So Drake, starting with the quarterback position here, Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco, Sam Ehlinger. To some, that might have been surprising. To see Sam Ehlinger kept over Jason Bean. But if you were listening to what I was saying on Monday night, and you as well, this really shouldn't have been a surprise. Sam Ehlinger was the third quarterback. Jason Bean, while he did show some flashes in the preseason, never really challenged Ehlinger for that third quarterback spot.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. If you get down to your third quarterback, you want reliability and veteranship. You want someone who's seen the field before. And even if it wasn't great, Sam Ehlinger has seen the field before, so he fits that QB3 role.
Exactly. So really nothing too surprising there. Anthony Richardson, obviously we're hoping plays every single snap for the Colts this season at the quarterback position, and Joe Flacco and Sam Ehlinger can kind of just collect those checks on the bench. As we move on to the running back position though, Drake, only 3 running backs. This I think kind of surprised us a little bit. Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, and Tyler Goodson gets that third running back spot over Evan Hall. And when you look at it, I think it means a couple of different things. Obviously, I think it means that the Colts are really confident in Trey Sermon coming back from that hamstring injury. He did practice this week, which is a really good sign. But it also, again, it comes down to numbers and special teams. At the end of the day, Tyler Goodson, while he did beat out Evan Hall, I think, for that third running back spot, he also is more valuable as on special teams than Evan Hall is. And ultimately, that's what it came down to. And Evan Hall did rejoin the Colts on the practice squad. So the Colts aren't giving up on Evan Hall, and he's still in the building. If an injury does happen, Evan Hall will be the first running back called up to the active roster. But again, I think it goes to show special teams matter when we're getting down to these final positions on the roster, Drake.
Absolutely. And also, just real quick credit to Tyler Goodson, after we've discussed this having the worst play of his entire career. He just goes out there and has an absolutely stellar preseason, and he looked ridiculously explosive at times. So good for Tyler Goodson, but also people, I know that it was a little bit of a shock to me that they didn't keep Evan Hall, but then I remembered he's a 5th-round pick. And I know that, you got your Micah Abrahams, you got your Jason Beans. Don't act like it's a shocker that the Colts don't keep a 5th, 6th, 7th-round pick on the active roster and they favor somebody who they think can do something a little bit more, like a Tyler Goodson, who's actually been out there and played. But I will say that I think that it means a lot that they kept Evan Hall, because before or right after they released him or waived him, they did say that they were hoping he could get through to their practice squad.
Yeah, they did, and I think ultimately the running back 3, and obviously injuries do happen in the NFL, so you want to have depth. But all things considered, if Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon are healthy, those are the guys that are going to be taking all the snaps at running back. In particular, Jonathan Taylor, who's probably going to get, I would say, 85% of the carries and of the snaps at running back. He is 100% the bell cow for this team. At the wide receiver position, again, not many surprises. This is the group that we had picked on Monday night to make the roster, Drake. Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell, Ashton Dulin, and Anthony Gould. Really, in my opinion, from 1 to 6, probably the strongest group of wide receivers that the Colts have had in a really long time. And all of these guys are young too. They're still developing and adding to their games, including Michael Pittman Jr. So I think overall, I know there's a columnist down in Indianapolis that doesn't necessarily believe so, or that the Colts have done enough at wide receiver.
Who's that?
I mean, you can talk about Mr. Column coming down there, but honestly, Drake, I think the Colts have done enough at the wide receiver position. I'm excited to see what the likes of Pittman and Downs and Pierce and Mitchell are able to do this season.
Yeah, and long gone are the days of 2019 when it was Zach Pascal and the Funky Bunch with Jacoby Brissett. Man, I mean, I remember those days. There's depth now. There's explosiveness here. Okay, there's reliability. There's volume receivers. There's guys with hands. I mean, you've got every kind of receiver here. You've even got a guy who can return kicks. and be potentially a utility type of guy. And I also love the fact that Ashton Doolin's name is finally healthy, okay, because he's got that special teams prowess. He's got the ability to make tackles in that regard, but he also can be, more of that downfield receiver if you need him to be in that role. So I like this group. It's 6 guys that I think each really post something different. Of course, Michael Pittman Jr., A.D. Mitchell, and Josh Downs are the ones you're probably going to be looking to make the most big plays. But don't forget about Alec Pierce. He is there to prove something too.
Absolutely. And Sarah says that is Captain Michael Pittman Jr. to you, Andrew. Yes, absolutely. shout out to Michael Pittman for being named a captain for the first time in his career. Definitely something he was striving for this season. Let's move to the tight ends, Drake. And again, we kind of predicted this was going to be the group. Mo Alley-Cox is going to be your starting Y tight end, your starting inline guy. Kylan Granson is going to be the starting move tight end, or that F tight end, with Will Mallory behind him. Drew Ogletree, another guy in line. I know there were some people that were talking about, is Ogletree going to be cut potentially for another option? Ogletree was never in any danger of leaving this team, and with Jelani Woods' injury, that really made the decision to keep these 4 a lot easier. Then speaking of Jelani Woods, I know we had talked about Woods potentially being one of those guys that receives the IR designation to return label. That was not the case. Jelani Woods was placed instead on season-ending injured reserve. So, Drake, that's 2 years in a row now where Jelani Woods is going to miss the entire season completely. He hasn't played in a game since his rookie year back in 2022. I mean, obviously, a brutal break. You really have to feel for Jelani Woods, who was pushed to get back, but at the same time, the best of ability is availability, and Jelani Woods, just plain and simple, just really hasn't been able to stay on the field.
Yeah, and first off, when you look at these 4 guys, I mean, our own Zach Hicks wrote a great piece on Mo Alley-Cox, and I've called for his head multiple times on the roster and everything else. Way different looking back now. Mo Alley-Cox is not going anywhere. Mo Alley-Cox is indispensable on this roster. That's all I'm going to say. So Kylan Grants is probably going to get the most snaps. Will Mallory is the most explosive, most intriguing option of this bunch. And then Drew Ogletree I think he needs to get a little bit better with his hands and route running. I mean, he's more of your blocking inline tight end anyway. He's never going to be that volume pass catcher. But to Jelani Woods, man, it really just sucks because you're talking about an uber athletic tight end that has so many tools to win on the field. And, the one time he plays is the Colts' arguably most embarrassing season in recent memory that they've ever had. Chalk on last year, can't even get on the field. Now here, last year was hamstrings. Now it's a toe. But remember last year, Andrew, we were like, why are hamstrings keeping him out for the year? Well, now we're going, why is a toe injury keeping him out for the year? So, there's something going on with Jelani Woods, and it really just sucks. I hope that the guy can get back on track, and that if there is anything left, that Indianapolis can pull it out of him, because I also would love to see what Tom Manning can do with him.
And Jelani Woods next year will be going into a contract year with the Indianapolis Colts, and it's really unfortunate too, because I mean turf toe injuries are nothing to mess with. Honestly, if you've ever had a turf toe injury, it really hurts. And for Jelani Woods to have the type of turf toe injury that required surgery, I mean that's serious. That means that there were ligaments and quite a bit of damage to that toe. So it wasn't just a stub toe, guys. There was actually a pretty serious injury there, which again, it's unfortunate. And until Jelani Woods now goes out there and proves that he can stay on the field, he's going to have that label, whether it's true or not. Let's go to the offensive line, Drake, and a whopping 10 guys were kept. I thought there was going to be 9, so not far off. Did miss on one guy, but altogether, I think this is one of, if not the best offensive line that the Colts have had, probably since 2018-19, in that area when Quentin Nelson was first entering the league. Obviously, the starters, Bernard Ryman, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Braden Smith. Those guys have been the starters since the middle of 2022. That's not changing this season. The swing tackle battle continues to rage on with Blake Freeland and Matt Gonzalez. At this point, and as we heard from Chris Ballard earlier, or was that? Yeah, that was yesterday. Heard from Chris Ballard yesterday that The Colts have tried Blake Freeland at right tackle, and he was able to hold up, not so much at left tackle. So it seems like Blake Freeland's spot is that right tackle position, and they have moved Matt Gonzalez back over to the left tackle. Again, we're going to watch this swing tackle battle rage on all season long in case one of Ryman or a Smith does go down. Tanner Bortolini there in the middle along with Dalton Tucker. Dalton Tucker, hell of a preseason, Drake, hell of a training camp. The undrafted rookie out of Marshall making a statement. And honestly, I was really glad to see Tucker make this roster.
Yeah, I have to throw out a very true post on X from Indy Star's Joel Erickson, and that is, find someone who loves you the way that Chris Ballard loves the trenches. All right.
Yeah.
Look, I'm telling you right now, the reason that the Colts have had nothing but offensive lines every single year is because Chris Ballard invests in the trenches. And so it's the same thing on the other side. But obviously everyone knows the top five. But man, Pinter was kind of the one where you're like, you might have been able to do without him, but he also has position versatility. Then Dalton Tucker, absolute dog type of mentality, comes from a school where that kind of mentality is predicated from the Thundering Herd. So that's awesome that he made the roster. Then you've got Matt Gonsalves. He's got the upside. Blake Freeland's going to get another chance, and Tanner Bortolini, who you can plug in there at center really anytime if he does earn the trust of Tony Sparano Jr.
Yeah, I didn't think that Danny Pinter would make the roster simply because I didn't think the Colts were going to keep 10 offensive linemen, and if other moves are made, I think Danny Pinter is probably at least right now, maybe the reason that Danny Pinter was kept on the roster is because of Tanner Bortolini's toe injury currently. Now, Tanner Bortolini, he's not a candidate for short-term IR or anything like that, and it does sound like he is close to returning to practice. Will it be next week? I don't know about that. But at the same time, maybe that's the reason Danny Pinter was kept on this roster, to be that backup center until Tanner Bortolini is back. Then you may see a roster move or two, or Danny Pinter might just stick around. We'll have to see what happens, because at center, we know he can be a quality backup center. At guard, not so much. So that's the offense for the Indianapolis Colts, Drake. Really not too many complaints on the offensive side of the ball. In my opinion, I would have probably kept maybe a fourth running back instead of a 10th offensive lineman. But overall, I agree with the numbers here and the players at each one of the positions that the Colts kept.
Yeah, and the only one that sticks out a little bit is tight end, but I think I can't remember who mentioned it to me, but they made me aware that, hey, most of the teams in the NFL, they operate with a tight end group, not a tight end one. So I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe in the future, maybe Colston Loveland out of Michigan. Maybe you can, or Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. Those are some names for all you draft nerds out there that they're already looking forward, including myself, because I'm an absolute sicko like that. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, Drake. Defensive line, another whopping 10 defensive linemen. The trenches, 20 out of the 53 players on this Colts roster in the trenches. So that statement by Joel Erickson about Chris Ballard, right on the money. The defensive line, obviously the starters, Kwity Paye, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, and as of right now, Tyquan Lewis. I think it's going to be Laiatu Latu before too long, especially with Chris Ballard's comments just saying he's going to play a lot. So it's going to be Laiatu Latu before too long. Then you have the likes of Raekwon Davis in the middle with Adetomowa Adebawore, who had a fantastic preseason. Dayo Odangbo is back, obviously, and then because of the injury to Samson Ebukam, Isaiah Land gets that final edge position. A guy that we really saw have a good preseason. Drake thought he had a chance to make the roster. We both picked him to make this final roster, and I'm really glad that Isaiah Land was given the opportunity for that. Will he play a lot of snaps this year? Probably not, but he's got a pass rushing skill set that you want to mold, and he's got all the physical tools, just kind of needs to iron out his game plan there. Good for Isaiah Land for making this final 53.
Yeah, his story, obviously he's not an undrafted rookie, right? And he's not undrafted out of college right now. But him and Dalton Tucker really were a couple of guys that in the trenches, they just played their asses off during the preseason, and they both made the roster. So good for them. Obviously, DeForest Buckner, don't really need to talk about him much. You know what he can do. Grover Stewart, Kwity Paye, Laiatu Latu, even though it's weird, even though he's a rookie, I don't really have to tell you much. So I think that the only one that sticks out to me, I guess first, Adetomo Adebawore totally earned that roster spot. Maybe one of the most improved players I saw in the preseason. Raekwon Davis is going to be a big deal. He's going to be a huge depth tackle. Isaiah Land, of course, but Dio Dangbo, he can play defensive end or defensive tackle. Now, speaking of him playing defensive tackle, Taven Bryan, I put it out on X. I said, you watch the Colts keep Taven Bryan.
You did.
And they kept Taven Bryan, and they still have Taven Bryan. So I don't know if it's that they feel like maybe even though he's been in the league since 2018, Charlie Partridge can do something with him. But I also think that if he does get inevitably, released, cut, whatever, I think that you do have Dio Dangbo who can play the interior too. I mean, this isn't just a straightforward approach. You can take some of these guys and move them around.
Yeah, exactly. And Noah, we're going to fight. Noah is saying that Taven Bryan deserves a roster spot. He's been an above-average rusher his entire career. Colts Abyss just been using him incorrectly. I mean, but listen.
What about his days with Jacksonville?
Taven Bryan may be an above-average rusher, but that man is well below average as a run defender. And if he's so far in his Colts career, yes, they may be using him incorrectly. Will they get someone that they're actually going to use correctly? I can't justify it. I really can't.
I like that Noah went to bat for him, though.
Hey,
no one has.
No one has. A good for Noah sticking up for Taven Bryan. I mean, someone has to. He's reached that same category. If you guys have watched this show or a Colts podcast before this, my thoughts. Taven Bryan is entering the same category as my thoughts on Matt Pryor and LaRaven Clark. I mean, I'm sorry, I absolutely drug those guys through the mud. I'm dragging Taven Bryan through the mud. He's right next to those dudes, in my opinion. But
he's a first rounder.
Well, maybe he shouldn't have been. So at the end of the day, Drake, I honestly, I'm very high on this defensive line. I think I've said it multiple times this offseason, but I think this is the best defensive line that the Colts have had under Chris Ballard, top to bottom, besides Taven Bryan. You could, if Kwity Paye takes another jump, he could have easily double-digit sacks and much improved pressure. That's what we've actually been seeing, is much improved pressure from Kwity Paye throughout training camp in the preseason. Now let's transfer that to the regular season, and Kwity Paye might actually become that type of player that the Colts thought he would be when they drafted him in the first round. You know what you're getting with DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, and then Latu. I mean, it would not surprise me in the slightest if Latu wins defensive rookie of the year. I think he has that type of potential. Is he going to get double-digit sacks this year? I don't think so. I mean, that's if he does, fantastic. But that's a high mark for a rookie. Could he get 7 or 8? Not out of the realm of possibility, Drake, and then have consistent pressure on the quarterback. So I am super high on this defensive line, not just the starters, but guys like Odangbo, Lewis, Davis, Adebawore. Like, the Colts are going to make noise with their defensive line this year and with Charlie Partridge, and I'm all here for it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where last season, everyone knows about the 51 sacks, but it was the pressures, and it really put a lot of stress on that secondary. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to seeing in a real game setting that matters what Charlie Partridge has done with these guys, because Indianapolis only felt that a coaching change was needed.
Now let's move to the linebacker group, Drake. And again, kind of what we thought it was going to look like. EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin, those are going to be your two starters. Jalen Carlisle comes in as that will linebacker in the base. EJ Speed is over at the Sam, but once the Colts go back to just two linebackers on the field, it's obviously Franklin and Speed. Then you have Saguna Luby, who is Zaire Franklin light, the backup Mike there in the middle, and Patrick's favorite player, Grant Stewart. And as Patrick said, I want to find the comment. It was just absolutely hilarious from Patrick. If I can find it, about Grant Stewart from earlier today, saying how he had 1 foot out the door because Grant Stewart wasn't named a captain. But I digress. Honestly, Drake, solid linebacker core. Cameron Grown was actually put on the injured reserve designated to return spot. one of the two. The other one was Samson Ebukam. Forgot to mention that with the defensive line. Chris Ballard did say that it's a long shot for Ebukam to make it back, but if anyone can do it from come back early from a torn Achilles, it is Samson Ebukam. But Cam McGrone has just an elbow injury. The Colts think that he will return from that, so that could play into some roster gymnastics at that time. We'll kind of see what happens, but overall, I think it's a really solid linebacking core for the Colts.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that they've got both Jalen Carlies and Segun Alubi in there, because Carlies is more of a cover guy. Alubi can do it, but he's more of that tackling machine. And, we always have to go back to it because it was the one game he started and finished and played the whole thing. But that Carolina Panthers game, he led the team in tackles. He had good pursuit angles. I mean, I'm excited for that linebacking core. And, of course, a Colts roster is not complete, Patrick Rye, without Grant Stewart. Okay, so...
Well, and I don't think that I think that's what Luby is here for, because if something does happen to Franklin, Luby can come in and stop the bleeding. Is he going to be at the same level as Zaire Franklin? No, not many linebackers can. I think Zaire Franklin is a top 10 off-ball linebacker in the NFL, but at the same time, Alubi can come in, stop the bleeding, and be a solid contributor in the middle of the defense there. At cornerback, Drake, here's where things get spicy. Only 5 on the active roster to start here. Obviously, the starters: Kenny Moore II, Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, Dallas Flowers, the first cornerback off the bench on the outside. And then the Colts kept Darrell Baker Jr. as that fifth cornerback, And Darrell Baker Jr. is no longer on the team. So he was on the 53-man roster for about 53 seconds because at the end of the day, yesterday, once the waivers came out, the Colts were awarded cornerback Samuel Womack III off of waivers from the 49ers. So once they were awarded Womack, Darrell Baker Jr. was released, was waived, and picked up today, actually, by the Tennessee Titans. So Darrell Baker Jr. no longer with the Colts, going down to Tennessee. But the bigger story, Drake, only 5 cornerbacks for the Indianapolis Colts on the active roster. And those 5 do not include Jalen Simpson, Micah Abraham, both draft picks this year, but both those guys were kind of playing mostly with the third team. Does not include guys like Amir Speed, Chris Lamons. Some of those guys are back on the practice squad, granted. So if an injury does happen, they can be elevated. But at the same time, Drake, only having 5 cornerbacks, you're kind of playing with fire here, because especially you don't have a nickel, a bona fide nickel to back up Kenny Moore. So if Kenny Moore goes down, I mean, are the Colts going to have to elevate Chris Lamons the first 3 weeks of the season, or until they have to add Lamons to the active roster? It's interesting. I mean, Womack can definitely play in the slot. So as of right now, I think it would be Womack that ends up being that nickel back. But still, 5 cornerbacks, in my opinion, that's risky. I think at least you'd want at least 6 on your active roster.
Andrew, the legendary 2-word phrase from Andrew Moore is beginning to surface here, and that is roster malpractice, people.
Roster building malpractice.
3-word phrase, roster building malpractice. It's right here in this cornerback room. Now, I will say, and our own Zach Hicks actually had a very funny but true tweet post on X. He said, I think, Chris, something to the tune of, I think that, if the Colts secondary works out and they play lights out, they play fantastic, Chris Ballard will be able to hold his head higher than anyone, because I'm pretty sure he's the only guy that believes in this plan. And when you look at it, Baker Jr.'s gone. Was he impressive? No. Okay, not an impressive cornerback. He is definitely a depth guy. But, you put Sam Womack in there, and yes, he's kind of similar to Darrell Baker. I mean, he's maybe a little different as far as a corner, but he's not – he probably hasn't played as much as Baker. But, like, Flowers, a little bit uncertain. I know Shane Steichen kind of alluded that he's, not hurt seriously. But after that, it's pretty much Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, 2 guys walking into just year 2, and one of them was hurt half of last season and continues to have weird injuries. And then it's Kenny Moore. So like you said, man, if you have to walk out there somehow with Chris Lamons, that's just not – that should not make you comfortable if you're Gus Bradley.
Yeah, I will say that I do think that Womack, and Patrick is kind of reading my mind here. Womack is a much better tackler than Daryl Baker Jr.
Okay, yeah,
Womack is better on the inside, so the Colts are really going with Moore and Womack on the inside, Brents, Jones, and Flowers on the outside. If they elevate Amir Speed can play on the outside. Jalen Simpson on the outside. Chris Lamons is more on the inside. So that's again, that's kind of where you're getting all this. Noah saying Jalen Jones will be a Pro Bowler, so we Gucci. I love the support for Jalen Jones. Noah is a Jalen Jones stan through and through. And Stats Matt kind of bringing us all back down to earth. It's roster building malpractice if it looks horrible. If it's average or better, then we all look dumb. I mean, nobody remember losing their minds over Fries being a starter, and that's very true. That's going to be the key here, as Drake
I always
totally raises his
hand.
hand. But hey, I mean, you're happy that Fries turned out the way he did because it turned the offensive line into the machine that it is, and the Colts offensive line again is looking like one of the best in the NFL. It's a risk, but if the Colts do hit on this, if Juju Brents is able to stay healthy and take another step and be a really solid cornerback on the outside, if Jalen Jones takes another step and is able to continue with his sticky coverage, we know what you're getting out of Kenny Moore. I mean, it could work out. It's a big risk. So I wrote about it in my piece for this morning on horseshoehuddle.com. If these guys turn out, if they take the next step betting on these young guys turns to be a really good move for the Colts, Ballard looks like a genius. If not, he's going to have some really tough questions to answer when the season is all said and done. Moving on to the safety spot, Drake. Really, no surprises here. Julian Blackman and Nick Cross are the starters. Rodney Thomas III is your third safety. He's going to play mostly free safety. So, say if Nick Cross gets hurt, then he'll come in. Obviously, Julian Blackman gets hurt. Nick Cross probably moves to strong safety, and you move Rodney Thomas to free safety. And then Trevor Denbo, one of the core special teamers for this group. So that we knew the safety group was heading this way with Julian Blackman and Nick Cross being the starters. Now it's time to put up or shut up for Nick Cross. You know what you're getting out of Julian Blackman. This is Nick Cross's opportunity to secure the starting job full time.
Yeah, we'll get into it later, but a brief preview is Ballard said that these guys got to play. All right. I mean, they have to play. You can't just keep on babying them along. And I know that everyone wants to with Nick Cross, but I think that they saw enough during the preseason that they were like, all right, you've proved it. You can go out there and play. So you've got your two there. Obviously, Rodney Thomas, if you can avoid him getting too many snaps, I know that sounds rude, but he's a liability. He really is. Out tackling, run defense, not that great. He's purely coverage. And then Trevor Denbo, Colts love their special teamers. I think he can play a little bit of that strong safety as well, but you're going to see him pretty much on special teams. I don't think you're going to see much of him, when defensive snaps action.
But again, playing with fire here, not much depth behind the starters. If Julian Blackman, remember that kid, he's a playmaker and has been fantastic all preseason and all throughout training camp. He's never played all 17 games in a season. If he goes down again, you're left with Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas II. That is not, I'm not very confident in that duo at the safety spot. So again, really playing with fire in the secondary are the Indianapolis Colts. Special teams, again, this is the three that we knew it was going to be. Matt Gay at kicker, Rigoberto Sanchez at punter, Luke Rhodes at long snapper. So that really wraps up this Colts 53-man roster. Overall, Drake, no, not too many surprises. They definitely have depth throughout, especially in the trenches. Yeah. But it's that secondary. That is very, very, the depth of the secondary, especially, is going to be scary, especially if Kenny Moore, Julian Blackman go down. Juju Brents has had some health issues as well. If one of those guys goes down, someone's going to have to step up in a big way, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to.
Yeah, and it'll be so late in the season. You'll have your practice squad guys, and you might have some guys available that you can pick up. But I mean, like you said, I think that they have a lot more belief in the secondary than everyone else from the outside looking in. So we'll see if it pays off, man.
Exactly. Nathan saying that Gay's job is in jeopardy since they have the undrafted kicker Spencer Schrader on the practice squad. No, Matt Gay's job is not in jeopardy. The Colts always carry a specialist on the practice squad, so that way Matt Gay can have some days off from kicking, as well as Rigoberto Sanchez, because Schrader can also punt. They
Yeah.
give those guys days off. Matt Gay, his job is not in jeopardy. I can guarantee you that. But Drake, let's now, as we've completed talking about the 53-man roster, now we can move on to the practice squad, because the practice squad, like I was talking about earlier, almost completely filled because of Marcel Dabo. He is on the practice squad for the Colts. He has that the international player international player exemption, I think is what they call it, or the international pathway program for those guys. So the he does not count against the practice squad is what I am saying. So because of that, the Colts are allowed to keep 17 players on their practice squad instead of the normal 16. And some of these names you guys will see are familiar. So we bring up the practice squad here. I will remove the banner so you guys can see the whole thing. But the Colts practice squad is as follows: McTelvin Agim, who was with the Colts, I think, last year as
Mhm.
well, during the Grover Stewart suspension. He was with the Houston Texans, ends up coming back to the Colts on their practice squad. Linebackers Austin Ajike and Liam Anderson. Jernard Avery, who had a solid preseason. Of course, fan favorite Jason Bean is back as that fourth quarterback and will be used probably quite a bit in practice scenarios. Marcel Dabo, like I mentioned, Evan Hull, Chris Lamont, Titus Leo is back, the former sixth-round pick. Antonio Mafi was a guard. I think he was also went to UCLA and played rugby, just like Leatu Latu. So some similarities there. Sean McKeon, DJ Montgomery, Spencer Schrader, Jalen Simpson, the fifth-round pick this year, Amir Speed, and Laquan Treadwell makes it through and ends up coming back to the Colts on the practice squad. So Drake, real quick, we don't have to spend too much time on the practice squad here, guys. But what are your overall thoughts on this practice squad, and then which names really stand out to you?
I think
Stand out to you?
overall, I like it. I think that you can develop some of these guys. I like the fact that they kept Jalen Simpson. I like the fact that DJ Montgomery remains within the Colts franchise, because I mean he played some meaningful snaps last year. And then of course Titus Leo is a feel good story. He's had all of last season removed and then had an injury that was a little scary. But man, the one that really sticks out is Evan Hall. I think that you can develop him in this practice squad. I think that Austin Ajike is another guy that really impressed during the preseason. So there's some guys on here. I think that it just further proves to everybody that Laquan Treadwell, people, nobody else wanted to get him. So I'm telling you that I think that he's in probably the best situation possible with a guy like Shane Steichen. And hey, he is going to push the living hell out of that secondary when they're practicing.
I think so too. For me, it's the secondary players. No, the only safety on the squad is Marcel Dabo, so it wouldn't surprise me if another safety is added
Yeah.
to that group. But you're looking at the corners. Obviously, we talked about the five that are on the 53-man roster. But Amir Speed and Jalen Simpson, those are your outside corners on the practice squad, and Chris Lamont is your nickel cornerback. So the Colts do have options, and I'm sure we will see the cornerbacks elevated quite a bit when you're talking about the two players that are elevated from the practice squad to the active roster on game day. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see a cornerback elevated at least for either every game or half of the games that they are available. So again, one more spot left on the Colts practice squad. Whenever we do know who that is, we will be sure to get that to you. So of course, Drake, something that we look forward to every year as well after the cuts is hearing from general manager Chris Ballard. So Chris Ballard did speak to the media this that was yesterday, yesterday, Wednesday, about the roster cuts. And honestly, I mean, it went about what you would expect. There was a lot of questions about the secondary and why he is so, I guess, confident in this group that that they're going to be able to succeed. And you kind of hit it on the head. I wrote about it. He thinks that, I mean, he said that the guys have to play. They're young guys, and the only way they're going to get better is by going out there and playing and taking those live reps. And in a sense, yeah, that's true. They're not going to get better just sitting on the bench. Cornerback, especially in those safety spots, especially, you need those live reps, and you're going to have to take your lumps. So just like Anthony Richardson is going to take his lumps, I think you can expect the likes of Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, Nick Cross, they're all going to have to take their lumps as well. But what the Colts are betting on is that through all of this, and as the season progresses, these guys are going to get better and better and end up turning into very reliable players for them.
Yeah, and you look at Juju Brents, missed all half of last season. Dallas Flyers didn't even play but 4 games last year, and this was really his first time to shine as a cornerback. Then you look at Jalen Jones; it was his first season, and then Nick Cross really hasn't had a full season without a short leash. So I get it. I get where he's coming from, but it's just on the surface. On the surface, it looks like an incredibly exploitable secondary, especially after last year. But again, you have to throw in the context of these guys were rookies, some of them, and some of them didn't play. So maybe they make that jump.
Yeah, and in the preseason, we've seen Jalen Jones look really, really good.
Oh yeah,
haven't really seen Juju Brents in the preseason, at least, because when he was out there for a couple of plays, started off with that pass interference, and then we had thought that his visor got hit into his nose and broke it. Turns out he spoke today, and someone's cleat, I think someone on the Arizona Cardinals, their cleat got up under his face mask, and that's what broke his nose, which is just really weird. I've never heard of that before, but yeah. I digress. And honestly, you think about, obviously with Jalen Jones is a 7th round pick, so he can't come in with huge expectations, but he's exceeded those. Juju Brents is a 2nd round pick. The Colts drafted Juju Brents to be a starter. They really did. When you're drafting a guy in the 2nd round, you think of all the 2nd round picks the Colts have had over the years. Adonai Mitchell was a 2nd round pick. You're expecting him to do big things. Juju Brents. The year before that was what was that? The 2022 class. And in 2022 was Alec Pierce. Pierce
that's right.
Was the 2nd round. You're expected Alec Pierce, Dio Dangbo. Those are the types of players that you're expecting to go out there and be starters for you. You really are. The only way Juju Brents is going to get better is if, number one, he stays healthy. That's the first thing. Juju Brents has to stay healthy and has to get those reps. And get those reps, simply put. So I don't have a problem with the Colts rolling out the starters that they have. Honestly, I don't. With Juju Brents and Jalen Jones, I think they both have a lot of potential. And if all goes right, those two very well could be the starting cornerbacks for the Colts for a long time. The issue that I have really is just the depth behind there, and not putting more emphasis on adding depth pieces, only keeping 5 on the active roster. I know that there's guys on the practice squad, but at the same time, they're practice squad players. They're not on the active roster for a reason. So not putting as much emphasis on the depth at the safety and cornerback positions, I think that's what I have a bigger problem with than letting guys like Brents and Jones and Cross go out there and then play as starters.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you've referenced it multiple times, and I think just to go back to it really brief, what happens if Kenny Moore just has to, miss a couple of games when you're looking at Chris Lamons potentially replacing him, and that is a steep drop off. That's like off the edge of a cliff type of talent drop off. So I think that maybe it's not over yet, people. Maybe there's still some moves to be made. There's still talent out there. But right now it looks like Chris Ballard really believes in these 5 guys. We'll see.
Yeah. And as NFL Nerd said, Pittman and Taylor were 2nd round picks as well. If you go one step further and go to the 2020 draft, NFL Nerd helping us out there. Thank you so much. Stats, Matt, again, kind of being a level head here. As I've said to everyone, give it 4 to 5 weeks before judging this team. Colts haven't won a week 1 game in forever, so it takes longer than that. You don't know what a team is till a third or more through the season. And that is very true. Yeah. So again, kind of be patient and see what this team it ends up being. You can have your concerns, but hopefully, I mean, I say this because I know everyone's going to do it, but hopefully people don't overreact to week one, whether the Colts win or whether the Colts lose.
Yeah.
And another, speaking of overreaction, people were asking Chris Ballard yesterday about his job security.
Yeah.
If he felt like he was on the hot seat, or if he felt like his philosophy was one that was able to lead this team to a Super Bowl. First of all, guys, Chris Ballard is not on the hot seat. I know that some fans might want to believe it, but when Shane Steichen was hired and when Anthony Richardson was drafted, that reset the clock for Chris Ballard. It simply did. He is tied to both those guys. So if Chris Ballard is fired, Shane Steichen is likely gone. Anthony Richardson's likely gone. It's going to be a complete turnover of this team. Whether you like it or not, those are simply the facts of what we're doing here. And Chris Ballard even said, I'm going to stick to my roster building principles. And if that gets me fired, then so be it. And honestly, Drake, this isn't even about Chris Ballard's philosophy or whatever, because most of the time I agree with how he attacks things. Is there some things that he should be criticized for? Absolutely. But as far as not overspending in free agency, building through the draft, that has been proven to be the way to build a winning team and have sustained success in the NFL. But not even talking about that, this is an honest question for not only fans of the Colts, but just in your everyday life. If you had a leader that was changing their philosophy just like that, because other people were upset or other people were pressuring them, is that the kind of leader you really want? Or do you want a leader that's strong in their convictions? And that's a question you can ask about in your job, in your personal lives. In my opinion, you want a leader that is strong in his convictions, obviously listens to outside voices and takes criticism and takes everything into account. But at the end of the day, it's the core values that matter. And I think Chris Ballard has done a good job of that. He's definitely not above a reproach or above criticism. I think there are definitely things that you can criticize and should criticize Chris Ballard for. But as for him just to be able to flip-flop, or for fans wanting him to flip-flop just because they're putting pressure on him, that's not what a winning GM or a winning franchise does.
Yeah, and say what you want, GMs in the NFL get to that level by listening to the people around them. In fact, the only GM in the NFL who has become a GM without listening to a single human being is because his first name is Jerry and his last name is Jones. Okay, and Cowboys, they're in disarray, to say the least. So I think that everybody wants to win. Everybody wants a shiny new toy. Everybody wants an incredible free agent. I remember when people were absolutely jazzed when the Colts signed Andre Johnson. How'd that work out? You don't go out there and just sign anybody because of a name or a talent. That's not how you win. It just is not. Have teams won doing that? Yes, but it's more proven that you build your talent in the house. And then when they finally get to that peak, everyone's built with each other and they all know each other. And that's why that offensive line means so much to the Colts. So I think Chris Ballard has done a lot of good. I think that he has also had some very crazy circumstances go down, retiring players here, injuries there, trying to find the right quarterback after. I think that, like you said, when Shane Steichen got that 6-year contract and Richardson was drafted, that was when Chris Ballard's job as GM really did start. And whether you like that or not, like you said, Andrew, it is what it is and it is how it is.
Yeah. So again, Chris Ballard, his job is not in jeopardy. And if he does get fired, that likely means the entire turnover of the roster, including Shane Steichen, which I know fans don't want to get rid of Shane Steichen. But then he talked about the fronts and what he said about the fronts. Completely agree with Drake. He thinks that this is the best Colts team on the front since he's been here, and from top to bottom, offensive line, defensive line. I tend to agree with him, especially if Bernard Ryman takes another jump. Maybe Will Fries takes another jump. You already know what you're getting out of Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith. This could be a top 3 offensive line in the NFL. And from what we have seen out of the defensive line, all training camp, all preseason, with Latu coming on, Buckner being back to his normal self, same with Grover Stewart, Kwity Paye taking a jump. Those 4 guys right there, the Colts defensive line has a chance to take a step forward. Now, when you talk about the others behind them taking a jump, this Colts defensive line could be scary. So completely agree that the Colts fronts are the best they have been. And honestly, Drake, that might be why he also has some conviction in the secondary, because he doesn't believe that this Colts secondary is going to have to go out there and cover for 5-6 seconds down the field, because he feels like this defensive line is so strong, and that the linebacking group, especially with Franklin and Speed, are strong too, that the Colts are going to get after the quarterback and make plays there. These guys aren't going to have to cover for so long, and they'll be able to kind of capitalize on the mistakes of opposing quarterbacks and wide receivers because of the pressure that defensive front is putting on them.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that he's invested so much in these two spots, because your two top weapons are Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. What the hell do they do without an offensive line? How do you get the ball to Pittman without one? And then on the other side, what's the best way to help an inexperienced, developing secondary? Pass rush, baby. It's not letting him sit out there on islands to cover for seconds and seconds and seconds. Because one episode you mentioned, hey, if it's 3, 4, 5 seconds, no cornerback in the NFL is going to be able to hold back even probably a third, fourth string receiver for that long. So I think it matters to have pass rush, and I think that Chris Ballard has built it. And then you draft Leatu Latu. I think that they're ready to unleash this.
Yeah, and the stats, Matt says that defensive line would be even more amazing. Samson Ebukam, we're still on it, so just gotta.
You wouldn't have Taven Bryan.
Thank God. I mean, yeah, I would jump for joy at that. Patrick with another $10 super chat. The CFO, we're not worthy, brother. We're not worthy of all of this, man. We really appreciate it. You're an absolute legend. And Patrick says, I think most of this Ballard hot seat talk wouldn't even be a thing if the Titans of all teams weren't going out and snagging big names and spending money. When a rival is that active, it stings more. And certainly, I mean, the Colts fans go out and see the Titans going out and signing and making a lot of moves. You see the Houston Texans making a lot of moves. Jacksonville's always active on the free agency as well. But at the same time, how many Super Bowls do those teams have, guys? And I know the Colts haven't won a Super Bowl in a long time, but it just, when you go out and make all of those moves, it typically doesn't end well. So, and a lot of the moves that the Titans have made, like, yes, they got Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams. They went out and just got Ernest Jones, who, again, having some knee problems. L'Jarius Sneed, great cornerback, but there's an injury history there. So there's risks with those as well. And if they hit, I mean, Ron Carthon and Brian Callahan are going to look like geniuses, and the Titans might be a bigger threat than we originally thought. But if not, it could send the team into a spiral as well. So we'll have to see. Patrick, thank you so much for all of your support, brother. We really, really does mean a lot to Drake and I every single time we do this show. But Drake, let's finish off the Chris Ballard talk with Anthony Richardson. Of course, he was asked about the quarterback. What's he expecting out of Anthony Richardson in year one? And he kind of echoed what we had been saying. There's going to be some ups, there's going to be some downs, but he's been really impressed with how Richardson has handled his return from injury, how he attacked his rehab, how he stayed in everything mentally, and how he has progressed mentally, not only as a passer, but just as a quarterback in general, and his understanding of things. And he's a very smart kid, and he feels like he's got all the potential in the world. And that's what we've been saying about Anthony Richardson. But again, you just got to be patient. Year two for a quarterback, when he only had 4 starts last year, there's going to be some really good moments. There's also going to be some bad moments. You kind of just have to take the good with the bad as Anthony Richardson learns to play quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, and kind of in a way again, because you have those first 4 games and then you're done for the next 12 weeks. So it's kind of an extension of his rookie season in a way. So yeah, Colts fans, please be patient with Anthony Richardson, especially like stats Matt mentioned. First 3 or 4 games of the year, you gotta wait until about a third of the way through the season to truly judge a team.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, Chris Ballard will be judged, as he should be, on how this team finishes. Wins and losses is what you should judge in this sport. And the Colts, I think, have a team that can compete for the division title, their first division title since 2014. I really do think that they will be up there battling with the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars, coming down to the wire. And if not, they should at least be a playoff team. I think that's what the expectations for this Colts team should be. And I think Chris Ballard, when he said, a lot of times Chris Ballard does tamper down expectations. And the most you're ever going to hear out of Chris Ballard of him saying that they're going to be a good team is he said, I think we'll be in the mix. I think the Colts will be in the mix and have a chance to do some pretty special things, especially if number 5 really takes off as the season goes along. Drake, let's update the people on the latest injury news and some really good news on the injury front. We talked about Juju Brents and his nose. He did return to practice this week, and Shane Steichen said that he is expecting Juju Brents to be out there and ready for week 1. Same with Trey Sermon. He has returned to practice from his hamstring injury as well. Both those guys expected to be out there for week 1. Trey Sermon is good for the depth of the running back position, but Juju Brents, that's a big one. He needs to be out there week 1 and not only be out there, but he needs to be playing close to the top of his game when you're facing the likes of Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. This secondary is going to get tested real quick come week 1, and they're going to have to step up and respond to the challenge.
Yeah, and they also have Joe Mixon and Dalton Schultz. I mean, this is a team that's going to push that secondary to the brink, and you're not going to be able to do it without Juju Brents. So,
yeah, exactly. Josh Downs still dealing with that ankle injury, but again, the Colts aren't ruling him out for week 1. I said he's making really good progress. So if we see Josh Downs out there next week to begin the practice on Wednesday, I would say that it's definitely a possibility. If you don't see Josh Downs practicing on Wednesday, then I would probably lean that he is not going to play week 1. Dallas Flowers did miss practice today with a hamstring injury, but Shane Steichen said it is minor and he doesn't think it's going to impact him for week 1. But again, something to monitor just simply because the Colts only have 5 cornerbacks on the active roster.
Yeah, and if one of these guys for some reason can't go, I expect Indianapolis to probably at least have some kind of contingency plan in place. And of course, you can always pull somebody up from the practice squad as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, Tanner Bortolini with that toe injury didn't practice today, but was seen at practice working with the trainer and was doing some sprints inside before practice. So, Tanner Bortolini is progressing well, could suit up for week 1 as well. Overall, not a too terrible injury report for the Colts heading into week 1, and it'll be smaller next week once we do actually get going and the practices are leading up to the game. Drake, let's talk about some latest Colts news and rumors here before we let the people go. There's college football on tonight. North Dakota State playing Colorado. I'm going to be watching that tonight. That's going to be a fun game. But the Colts did announce 8 captains, most that I can remember the Colts ever having. I thought the most they would do is 7 like they did last year, but 8 captains for the Colts this year. Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., as Sarah said, his first captain patch going to Michael Pittman this year. Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin, and Kenny Moore II. And Drake, out of all those 8 guys, all of them deserving. Can't think of a single one of them that shouldn't be named a captain. Again, this is voted on by the players of the Indianapolis Colts, but all these guys really good leaders for the locker room.
Yeah, and they're probably the 8 most important players to your success in 2024.
Plain and simple. Yes, that's very plain and simple. You nail it on the head there. The Colts, like I said, did lose cornerback Darrell Baker Jr. to the Titans off of waivers. For depth purposes, kind of hurts, but at the same time, you kind of hope Darrell Baker Jr. isn't out there playing for you because we saw what that kind of did last year. Some other guys the Colts lost off of waivers were defensive tackle Jonah Laulu, the 7th round pick. Didn't really think he was going to make the roster, still had a ways to go, but he ends up getting picked up by the Raiders. And Eric Johnson, who's been with the Colts for a while now, never really panned out. He is heading to the New England Patriots. So, I mean, Laulu is probably the biggest name just because he had some potential. I thought he could be a contributor on the defensive line, just not this year. He still has got a way to go.
Yeah, and that was the plan because they had so much talent on the defensive front that was what they wanted to do, is to get him on the practice squad to keep developing him, but somebody got to him quicker.
Exactly. And then our final news tonight, Jake Witt the offensive tackle that the Colts drafted last season in the 7th round, retired suddenly yesterday, citing long-term health and personal reasons as to why he did not want to continue. Spent all of last year on injured reserve, was cut from the team this year at final roster cut downs. The Colts did want to bring back Jake Witt on the practice squad. They did think that he had potential to develop into a depth piece along the offensive line, but football just turns out it wasn't for Jake Witt. And you have to respect, again, we all, as people that have followed the Colts for a long time, we all know that when players retire, it can be for a variety of different reasons. So good on Jake Witt for, if he felt like he wanted to take charge of his personal health and football wasn't for him. Hey, at least he did make it to the NFL, and you got to wish him well.
Yeah, and it's we're not the ones out there pounding our bodies against other giant human beings day in and day out. So maybe he just felt that it was better for him to do something different. But you know what? Hey, best of luck to Jake Witt, and it was awesome to have him as a Colt while they had him.
Yep, exactly. So the 53-man roster for the Colts is set. A lot of depth around this roster, a lot of interesting and players that you're excited to see in 2024. And then, like we said, the biggest concern is probably that secondary group. And if it all works out and they turn out to take the next step, Chris Ballard looks like a genius, and he looks like Juju Brents and Jalen Jones could be the answers. Nick Cross as well. But if guys get hurt, that depth is really going to be tested, and you don't really like the names that are behind the starters currently.
Yeah, and hey, here's to hoping that what we're seeing is totally different than what Chris Ballard believes, because he seems to absolutely be ready to go to war for this secondary.
Patrick, you're an absolute menace, and that's going to end the show here tonight. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, especially Patrick Rye, the CFO, for his super chats and just keeping the chat lively as always. But let's give a shout out to some other stats, Matt. As always, Sarah, we had Paul Wilson in the chat, Wombat, NFL Nerd, our colleague Noah Jaber, and everyone else. Wyatt Law was in the chat, and Nathan, Greg, anyone that I missed, Sean Contright, as always. Appreciate everybody's support and talking Colts football with us every Monday and Thursday night. Make sure to go follow all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts_SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live, whenever Noah goes live with the Shoehorn Podcast. We've got content pretty much every single night on the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. And then also go ahead and subscribe, give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. You get the Horseshoe Huddle halftime episodes as well, and it helps us reach other Colts fans just like you. Drake, tell the people what you've got out there on horseshoehuddle.com that they can read so they can get off.
So I've got that Anthony Richardson's going to be is going to be again the youngest quarterback in the NFL, and then of course I've got that the Colts announced their team captains for the 2024 season. So that is everything that I'm covering. And then I believe that Andrew Moore has got plenty of pieces out there. It looks like Andrew might have actually lost connection. So what we'll do, Colts fans, is we're going to go ahead and call this short. Andrew's, I think, he's caught in translation. But until next time, we will be joining you guys on Monday to start talking about our predictions for the season. We're going to slowly start to transition into real games that matter. So until then, Colts fans, we will be seeing you then, and have a wonderful, wonderful Labor Day weekend. See you then.